The federal government has disclosed plans to approve additional import licenses for oil marketers in the country to ensure consumers have options. Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority disclosed that 6 new companies got approval to bring the commodity into the country. He added that apart from the approved 6, several companies applied for a permit to import petroleum products, of course, in due course. Joining me to break this down is an energy lawyer, an analyst, is Dr. Ayodele Oni. Dr. Oni, good afternoon, and thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me yet again.
Yes, Dr. Oni, now that the marketers have partly gotten a nod from the federal government to start to import PMS, premium motor spirit, what we all call fuel, do you see that market being as attractive as it should be for marketers, considering challenges with FX and other developments in that space?
Okay, thank you very much. Good question. I think it will be. Actually, some of those challenges are what you've mentioned. FX, at times the challenge of looking for it at the what was before the official rate. Looking for it at the official rate meant you had to be on a queue at times for as long as 2 years, 3 years. At times you'd have to then cut corners, a lot of unwholesomeness around that. But with the floating of the naira and your ability to be able to get it at what it generally is now, it would make it more attractive. And remember, it's market forces of demand and supply. You would only sell for whatever amount you then buy at the international market once you are licensed. And the rules are in the Petroleum Industry Act as to who can be licensed. If you have some experience doing trading, if you have an active refinery, then you can't be issued a license. It becomes competitive. You're able to source your dollars. You're able to buy it, probably look for a place where you can buy it at a cheaper price, provided, of course, you meet the quality specifications. So those standards, those quality specifications will be there. Once you meet those, you'll be able to buy, and you'll be able to sell more profitable, just the way the guys who sell cooking gas and those who sell diesel and those other petroleum products that were no longer regulated, which pricing was no longer regulated in particular.
Well, getting to that, I'll follow up again. Many are asking the question that the ultimate aim is to deregulate. Subsidies out. And now marketers are going to get into having a level playing ground to bring in products. What stage of the full deregulation are we? Can you make us understand it? Following the PIA, please.
Okay, interesting question. People see deregulation from different points of view. Now, petroleum products, like any energy product, anywhere in the world, will still be regulated. Now, the deregulation people use or misuse at times is around price control. The what used to be the DPR, now the Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, used to issue templates, pricing templates, and determine what the pricing was going to be. And you had things like the equalization fund, such that the price of fuel, PMS, for example, in particular, in Lagos will be what it is in the interlands, such that there was that fund to pay you the difference. So if they are selling at 200 in Lagos, in the interland, remember that there are extra costs around security, transportation, haulage, all of those, insurance, which will make it more expensive in the interland, places where you don't have ports and all of that. But equalization made that available. That's no longer going to be in place. All of those are not going to be in place anymore, so that you sell for what you buy. And so the regulation, the oil and gas industry will always be regulated because you have issues around safety, health, and environment. But pricing is the key reason, and ensuring that you have more players being able to go and source for the product and then sell. So it will continue to be regulated because you have to have rules, or else people are going to import bad quality fuel. People are going to do unwholesome things. So, but what we expect is that price control will be removed, and you can have more competition, more people going to source for that product. That's people seem to or tend to misuse the term. Just like the electricity sector, it will always be regulated. It's just that you have less controlling every aspect of what you do from pricing and all of that. Much of that will be out, but you still have quality control and all of those in place. That's what it means. And I think we're almost there with the issuance of licenses now to more players go and buy and then resell at a margin, at a delta.
Now, if government is planning to end fuel importation by first quarter of 2024, probably 2024, and we are at this point, we have Dangote refinery, well, capacity of 650,000 barrels per day. Of course, it's going to import. It's not going to give us all that it produces, and it's going to make money. He has to make money. He is a businessman. And Port Harcourt refinery is likely to come on stream, and maybe one or two other refineries come on stream. What really do you think can be done for us to get to that actualizing, reducing importation? I don't want to say stopping in totality by first quarter 2024. What are those things that you think needs to be put in place?
I think you've answered part of the question. You need to ensure that those refineries work. You need to ensure that they have food that they can refine. And I understand that a number of them are already having those conversations. For example, the NNPCL investing in Dangote refinery. I believe because the refinery isn't completely ready is why there's even so much talk about importation. Because if the refinery alone can cater to all of our needs and have excess, then the issue around importation doesn't even come to the fore. But because that's not the case, that's why we still have issues around importation. And we will stop importation as long as we are self-sufficient. So refineries should be in place, crude should be available, those hindrances in the market around Forex, even around Forex is very little when it comes to compared to when you are importing. So I don't think much money needs to be done in the country, and the government should make it enabling doing business. The regulatory regime should be easier so that it's not just what you have in the law, but in practice, you can easily obtain licensing for the full gamut from moving or buying crude to refining crude and being able to take same to the market. And I think a lot of that is already being dealt with by both the authority and the commission, the upstream commission and the midstream and downstream authority. And I think we should not have any problem as long as Dangote keeps his word around the refinery. Warri and Port Harcourt is also ready. And we also have a number of modular refineries which cannot do PMS because of issues around the cost of buying the particular equipment, which will make it not profitable. So it's only bigger or larger refineries that can do PMS. The smaller ones can do maybe up to NAFTA, but cannot do PMS. Yeah, so I think we're well on our way, to be honest.
Moving on, staying with the PIA, I also like to ask you, talking about the host community now, my mind just went there because, you know, we really need to put them into consideration. That's where we get this oil from. And looking at what is in for them in the PIA, that many are saying, well, it's a step in the right direction. But do you think that we would be able, or the government will be able to address the level of damage already being done or that has been done to their waters, you know, and all of the negative effects, all spills and all of this that have been witnessed in that part of the country? Do you think this allocation can address this? What do you think international oil companies can do to make these communities at least get value for what is coming out from their ground?
Okay, good question. I look at it from two perspectives. One, the host communities having skin in the game and getting benefits from their oil in terms of pecuniary benefits and other benefits. And I also look at it from a health, safety and environment point of view. I mean, the world is moving gradually to ESG, environment, social and governance. Now, from having skin in the game and getting pecuniary benefits, fiscal, financial benefits, there's a trust arrangement that the PIA does recommend or mandate, so to speak. And there's a percentage of revenues, I think around 3% from revenues that should go into the trust. You know, there'll be a set law, which will be each IOC. As long as you have operations in that area, it's even broadly defined to even midstream and downstream areas. Once a pipeline pass through those areas, then you will be bound to set up a trust arrangement. And the Upstream Commission has issued, and the authority, they both have issued guidelines, regulations around how that will be done. And I expect that in operationalizing it, Nigeria, the problem usually is the devil is in implementation. It's not the depth or inadequacy of legislation or laws. It's in implementing those laws the way they ought to be implemented. So I expect that both the authority and the commission would ensure that that's done. Plus, of course, monies are supposed to be put in place for issues around decommissioning, abandonment, and putting back those places the way they were prior to starting operations. Those are things that just need to be well implemented. It's not whether we have the regime, it's whether implementation is done the way it ought to be done. So the IOCs, they operate everywhere else in the world, and they take care of the environment. They take care of health, safety, environmental issues. If they can do that in Sweden, do that in Norway, do that in Calgary, in Canada, they can do that in Alberta, then they should be able to do it even in Qatar, in those other countries. They should be able to do it in Nigeria. It's whether we have the political will, it's whether the regulators do what they ought to do to enforce and ensure that the laws are complied with, relevant legislation and regulations are complied with. Once that's done, then we should have no issues with those communities. And issues around theft, too. I see that the government is working with indigenous companies in those areas, indigenous people in those areas to stem the tide. And I think that seems to be going on very well. So I think it's an implementation. I think the laws, the PIA is done reasonably well. Of course, there are challenges here and there around implementation, definition of certain terms, what it covers, who the settlers should be, under what circumstances, all of those are being ironed out. I won't be surprised if the PIA is amended slightly very soon to better deal with some of these issues. But as things stand, if we have the right people implementing these laws, implementation will drive home the point and will ensure that things work well between host communities and the IOCs and exploration and production companies generally, because not only IOCs we have in Nigeria, we have the juniors too. We have other indigenous oil exploration and production companies.
Great stuff there, as usual, Dr. Oni. Dr. Oni, let's move to another very important sector, which is electricity. The president assented to the 2023 Electricity Act, and that, of course, has generated comments from all and sundry. Some don't even understand basically what this means. So I think we'll start from that. How can you make a layman understand what it means, what that bill means, as it's been signed into law already? It's an act. So what does it really mean, and what impact would it have positively, of course, on Nigeria's electricity sector?
Okay, good question. I'll take it from this angle. Before now, we had a law. Before 2005, particularly before even 1999, you had government being in charge of power. You had NEPA. Some people call it Never Expect Power at All, which then became PETROLEum, Power Holding Company of Nigeria. Some would say, please hold your candle now. Showed how things were at that point. So we had a president that was Olusegun Obasanjo, who thought that we could improve the sector. And then it's not sufficient to just think. You need to take action. And one of the things to do is to have a policy, and laws are the vehicles for implementing policy. So there was the National Electric Power Policy. It became a law. Provisions, there was a law to implement that policy, which was the Electric Power Sector Reform Act of 2005. Now, we saw that, and then that provided for privatization and a number of things. But it fell short in some areas. How would post-privatization work? Certain things weren't taken care of. Distribution, how do you separate distribution from supply, like what you have elsewhere in the world, where you can have a number of distribution companies come to meet individuals to say, we'll offer you a better rate, or customer experience will be better. So they thought that it was better to have, and then constitutionally, many people thought it was better for states to have more powers around creating their own electricity market, being able to give investors more confidence, and everything being federal. It was mostly federal government doing all of it. I know it's difficult to have the federal government do all, local government and all of those. So people thought, if And the constitution was also part of the challenge. Even though it was in the concurrent list, the powers of the state were very limited, almost only to distribution. They could not, if they wanted generation and transmission, it had to be in areas that the grid did not get to. Now the problem is almost everywhere in Lagos has the grid reaching there. Almost everywhere in almost every state did. So it meant the state didn't have powers to do anything other than distribution. And that was even very clear in the law. It was the interpretation was more than one, you know. So there was need for a new law that allowed, and I call it STAR, and it allowed 4 things: state participation, that's individual states, state and private participation. It dealt with electricity theft, because electricity theft was a major challenge, and the old law didn't deal with the electricity theft. People stole electricity. If you steal something that everybody is supposed to use, it means many people can't then use it. If you use electricity without paying for it, it means that the distribution companies would not earn revenue, and they would then not be able to do what they are supposed to do with your funds. You know, people stole, people did all sorts. They would tap electricity, they would steal electricity lines, equipment, and all of that. So the second thing it dealt with very well is theft. The third thing was access. More people should have access. You know, you have mini grids. Now, states almost have exclusive powers. There are conditions anyway with relation to mini grids, IEDs, IETNs, that's independent electricity distribution networks, you know. So it gives states more powers to even be able to create their own electricity market, so that Lagos State, for example, can assure its citizenry of electricity almost all of the time. It will take some time to get there, but they now have the power. They can work with the private sector, they can work with private companies to assure. The only thing we need to be careful of, we need to know what the problems were with the federal situation that ensured we didn't have power, so that we can avoid these same problems, such that we do not replicate those problems across the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. That's the second thing it talks about: theft. So first is state participation, second is theft. The third one is access. More people will have access in rural areas. States, electricity boards can be set up, rural electrification and all of that, it deals with that. And renewable energy, the world is speaking renewables. And because the world is speaking renewables, you don't want to be left behind. I think oil and gas, particularly gas, will still be with us for a long time, but renewables are beginning to play a more critical role than they ever played. So the law, and in the old law, I'm not sure, maybe more than once would you see the word renewable in that law, if it was there at all. But this particular law dealt with renewable, gave NEC certain mandates, you know, and even gave certain incentives for guys who wanted to do renewables. And NEC could even make rules to ensure that generators, distribution companies took a particular percentage of renewable energy. So if you look at it from that point of view, STAR, state and private participation, encourage that, unlike what you had in the old law. Electricity theft, it seeks to, and you see stuff like at least 3 years imprisonment, at least 500,000 fine, and or both. When it's at a company, a corporate, it's double that. You know, very serious, well-defined, exhaustive provisions around theft, from tapping, from stealing, to bypassing, to even, you know, you hear situations where distribution company officials go to certain residences, go to certain streets, and they prevent them from doing what they should do. I saw fines of like 2 million naira, you know, and when you're a second offender, it gets worse. You can go to prison. You know, it's more definitive. It's firmer in terms of the regime around theft and accessibility, like I said, and renewable energy. I think those form the fulcrum of that law in my view. So it makes it, if it's well implemented. And one very interesting thing I'd like to say. Okay, I thought you were speaking. One interesting thing I also like to state is that it provides for an integrated plan, which will involve both federal, state, players, individuals, and other bodies. I find it there's a national electric sector, strategic plan, an implementation plan for that strategy, you know, and we should all get involved so that we have an integrated plan for the sector. Because I always say that if we don't have an integrated plan, we will just act haphazardly. people will do whatever they like in states, and it will not be coordinated. So the fact that that law also provides for an integrated strategy and implementation plan is a very positive step. So I think that's what the law does. All of those 4 plus an integrated approach to planning and data-driven approach to planning.
Interesting conversation with you as usual. Dr. Adeleoni, I must thank you so much. We're still going to go into more details with regards to this new act, but of course that will be in our next chat. I must thank you, energy lawyer, analyst, Dr. Adeleoni, for your time on the program. We do really appreciate this.
Thank you very much for having me yet again. Enjoy the rest of your day.